Quarantine Chats. We got a very special guest here today, NBA reporter, national reporter for USA Today, Mark Medina. He's covered the Lakers dynasty with Kobe Bryant, Pau Gasol, and the Warriors dynasty with Durant, Klay Thompson, Curry, and Draymond. How you doing today, Mark?
Hey, I'm doing well, all things considered. Thankfully healthy and working during this whole ordeal, and hope you and everyone else is hanging in there.
Yeah, I'm really excited to have you on as a guest. Thank you so much for appearing in as our show. And, you know, Isaiah has personally been inspired by a lot of your work.
Oh, wow. Well, I'm humbled to hear such nice words. Definitely don't take that for granted. I'm honored to be on your show.
All right, so we'll start with the first question here. It's related to, you know, the whole COVID-19 crisis. Obviously, there's a lot of speculation as if the season is going to resume. And so we're going to jump to Isaiah, who has a specific question on how this season is going to play out.
Yeah, thanks, Steven. But before I go into my first question, I just want to take a moment and thank Mark for all that he's done for my sports media career. I met Mark back at Oracle Arena 2 years ago after one of the NBA Finals games in 2017. I was there working as an usher for the Warriors, and he was there covering the game, and we bumped into each other after both of our nights were done, and we had a conversation about the Warriors-Cavs game and also about how I really wanted to get into the sports media business and be like Mark and cover sports. And that conversation we had really propelled me into the sports media business that I'm in right now and really helped me start this podcast. So Mark, from the bottom of my heart, I just got to say thank you so much for helping me start my career. And the question that I have for you is, I want to start with the billion-dollar question, the question that everyone wants to know. Will the NBA resume? We've heard recently about Orlando and Disney World being the front runner to resume the season. And also we've heard about a potential play-in tournament for the 7 through 15 seeds in each conference. What's the latest as it pertains to the potential resumption of the NBA season?
Yeah, well, first off, Isaiah, really humbled and almost speechless about your really kind words and the, you laying out the impact that, our interaction at Oracle Arena did for you, and happy that, all that you've done so far and getting this podcast launched. So happy to lend a helping hand in whatever way I can, no matter how small. But to the question you asked about the NBA, it's very hard to say at this point. They had a meeting with the 30 GMs today. They're going to have more conversations on Friday with their board of governors meeting. What a board of governors meeting is, it's a meeting with all the owners. And from what I've been told, there's not a feeling going in that the NBA is going to come out of this meeting with this definitive resolution of when or if there will be a season. The agenda on the meeting is to, bounce ideas off each other and in terms of weighing the pros and cons of some of the proposals you just outlined. And so my sense is that they're going to have that conversation, then they're going to huddle up, put their notes together, probably have some more talks over the weekend. And then, this isn't definitive, but maybe at some point next week or the following week, there is more clarity on what they're going to do definitively. And as far as the proposals, nothing's ruled out. And so that makes it hard to say which way they're leaning one way or the other. But the reality is the NBA has maintained that the number one priority is safety. So when it comes to that, how do they weigh that? Do they try to have as few teams as possible and therefore jump into a play-in tournament or the postseason? Or do they think it maximizes safety if they have all the teams there and they can play more regular season games in hopes of not even just having more games on TV and getting more revenue, but allowing teams to phase themselves back into the season, and that might reduce the likelihood of possible injuries because these guys have not played any formal practice or scrimmage or even game for over 2.5 months. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. And frankly, I have no idea how it will play out because this pandemic is so unprecedented.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I really think the NBA do need to have a few regular season games before they jump right into the postseason. Because as you said, a lot of the guys don't really have access to gyms. Not a lot of guys are really lucky to have their own home gym. So I really think that with the players that aren't really in basketball shape right now, I think they got to have a couple of games, maybe as like a warm up, and then they can jump into the playoffs.
Yeah, and the sense seems to be when you talk to, different coaches and agents and GMs around the league is that, guys are going to need 3 to 4 weeks to start ramping things back up with practices. And here's the even more complicated thing. When I asked that question of Chris Paul, who's the head of the players union as the president, a month ago, he hesitated to say an exact timeline because he noted, look, every team's roster is different. Some are veterans, some are young guys, and so it might take longer for some of the veterans to get back into rhythm than some of the young guys. And also, it also depends on, maybe some of the veterans who are star players have had more access to be able to get actual workouts and get up and down the floor because they have either their own gym or have access to one. So not a lot of easy answers with how the NBA figures that puzzle out, as many others.
Yeah, and another question I have for you is, so before this pandemic hit, the popular opinion was that the NBA champion would be teams like the Lakers or the Clippers or the Bucks. However, do you see with this unique situation that we are in, do you think that this unique situation would give teams like the Rockets or the Celtics or the 76ers or some type of dark horse team a legit chance to win it all this year? Because everybody's got that like 2-month layoff now.
Yeah, it's a good question. At the end of the day, I mostly handicap the favorites the same way I did before the season was suspended. I will say that I expect that the Philadelphia 76ers will significantly improve because Ben Simmons was able to heal a little bit, and he was one of the most notable NBA stars that was dealing with injuries this season. Now with the Lakers, when you talk to LeBron James and some of his other teammates, they have made the point that it's not really, they knock against the conventional wisdom that, hey, this lapse has helped them because they're an older team. They feel like the momentum being stalled could hurt them because they were just starting to shift into gear and putting on the accelerator into full drive. And so it's that equivalent of using this car analogy that they're suddenly asked to come to a complete stop. So how do you regenerate that energy moving forward? But reality is, I think a lot of these teams are going to go through this. The Lakers in particular, because they are a veteran team, I think that they've probably been able to, deal with these circumstances a lot better. Guys like LeBron he has access to his own gym, but I think also because the team is mostly consistent of veterans, they've probably been more disciplined with the limited training, how they are with their diet, that some of these inevitable challenges that come up with rustiness and getting your timing down won't be as prevalent as maybe with other teams. But it's really a crapshoot. But if I had to guess, I still put the Lakers as the favorite to win, Clippers behind them, and the Bucks. At the end of the day, as it is in normal circumstances, usually talent is the number one thing that determines a team's success. And not to downplay the other factors, but I think that will still be the main thing that goes into play here.
Yeah, couldn't have said any better, Mark. It really depends on the circumstances. And you got to remember, all the teams are handicapped in this situation in the sense that they're not going to get the regular training. And we'll see how the season plays out. We'll see if the Lakers can regain that rhythm. Isaiah, did you have one more thing?
Yeah, one last thing I had to say before I turn it over to Ryan was I really think you have to give Frank Vogel, the Lakers head coach, a lot of credit for what he's done this season. We all know coming into this season that Frank Vogel was not the Lakers' top choice, not even their to be their head coach. And Frank Vogel, with the way that he has united this team, the way that he had them playing such great basketball, going down the stretch, beating the Bucks, beating the Clippers, and how he got guys like Dwight Howard, who is a multi-time all-star, to accept a role on the bench is just really, really impressive. Kudos to you, Frank Vogel, for just doing an outstanding job this season.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, at the end of the day, as you guys know, talent is the number one thing that drives an NBA team. So say, Frank Vogel wasn't doing his job well, I think the Lakers would still be in the mix because you have LeBron James and Anthony Davis. But I agree with your point that because of how, prepared Frank Vogel came in, he knew that he wasn't the not even just the first option. He wasn't the second option. He tried to, do the old cliche of, hey, roll up your sleeves and do some hard work. And that's how you'll gain respect. And I think that there's something to be said that, look, LeBron James is a great teammate, great player, but let's just call a spade a spade. He has had issues with his previous coaches at some point, in different points in time. And here there's been zero of that. There's been so much buy-in. And I think that that's provided a trickle-down effect that because LeBron James has respected him because of his work ethic and he knows what he's talking about and he has good game prep, that other players have bought in. I think, a good reflection of coaching is how well do role players play? Are you putting them in positions to succeed? And I think, for the most part, all these guys have been the best versions of themselves. You could probably argue, otherwise a little bit for Kyle Kuzma and Rajon Rondo, but I think a lot of that had to do more with Kyle Kuzma's injury and him getting through the initial hiccups of, hey, he's not a starter anymore. He's coming off the bench this season. And Rondo, he's been later in his career. But when you look at all the other guys, those two guys in particular have improved throughout the season. All the role guys, I think, have been the best version of themselves. A lot of that credit goes to Frank Vogel, and also a lot of the credit goes to LeBron for elevating them and making them feel empowered.
Yeah, Sheree, go ahead, man.
Yeah, definitely agree about Frank Vogel. And it's been fun to watch the Lakers this year. They've been one of my favorite teams to watch, just from a pure entertainment basis. But my question kind of has to do with college basketball. So recently we've seen top recruits out of high school like Jalen Gill and Dayshawn Nix bypass college ball and go straight to the G League. So what are your thoughts on the future of the G League and how does this impact college basketball and the NBA?
Well, it's certainly going to be impacting both parties. And, for college basketball, you almost see the G League as, hey, another recruiting rival, right? It's not so much anymore of just, hey, how do the ACC powerhouses rank against the Big East powerhouses and the Pac-12 and the SEC? Now it's, hey, do you go to the G League? At the end of the day, I think they're in this gray area where it's not like the majority of these prospects are jumping to the G League, but this isn't an aberration either. So college basketball obviously has to take this seriously. And I think that's already paved the way that this one and done rule is eventually going to, be eradicated probably by the next labor deal. And also I think it provides a case study into, okay, what is the best way to develop as a player? I come from the mind that, player empowerment is key. And I totally understand, why players resent the NCAA because they make so much money off of their likeness and they're not getting any of that in return, even both during their playing career and even afterwards. But I still think at the end of the day, when you are playing in college basketball, you are getting a window into the college lifestyle. You have an extra year of development. You do have some, you're able to take advantage of that exposure, where at least that helps with, your draft stock, your development, your name recognition, where, the life in the G League is not glamorous at all. You are, being on buses, you're staying at pretty crappy hotels, you're playing at empty gyms. And I think that can cut both ways. In some respects, it does test, how well are you able to, still fall in love with the game, even though you're not getting paid well. You're playing in not great conditions. You're playing, before really a handful of apathetic fans. But on the other hand, with college basketball, you're getting an early test of what it's like to play under pressure, right? Like you have these rowdy fan bases, especially during the tournament. So I'm laying all these things out here to say I don't know what the exact answer of what's the right avenue, but I think this has obviously come to pass because I think because of some of NCAA's outdated policies with how they pay players, and that there hasn't really been a sense of collaboration between the NBA and the NCAA of really making that a feeder system into the NBA. And instead they're clinging to this old notion that, hey, these are all amateur student athletes, when we know that that's really not the case.
Yeah. So Shree had a quick follow-up question as far as college athletes being paid to their likeness.
Yeah. So like as we all know, in 2021, the NCAA has introduced some legislation that, college athletes can be paid for their likeness. So being that a major issue with college sports is that the athletes are unpaid, do you think that this kind of decelerates the growth of the G League, or do you think that continues even after this?
No, I think the G League is going to continue to grow, and a lot of teams have really leaned on that and making it part of almost the equivalent of what Major League Baseball has, with it being, a minor league team. You'll have a lot of teams, especially in small markets, lean on their G League teams to, sign guys on 10-day contracts when, some of their players are hurt. Maybe not their franchise guys, but some of their role players, maybe they'll send them down to their G League team to get some time in the scrimmage to help with their rehab. But as far as, the payment solution, again, I come from the perspective of player empowerment and that you should be compensated fairly. But when it comes to paying college athletes, I am skeptical of how it would work in that system of, where there would be a platform of guys being paid directly, because then you open up this whole Pandora's box where then you're having agents getting involved, and there could be something that exposes the difference between the major and mid-major programs, the haves and the have-nots. I think the best solution here is that you're allowed to, work with whatever summer job you have. You get some kind of stipend. So for, the players that come from, tough backgrounds where their families don't have the means to support themselves, it's not like they're living in poverty in college. And also I think the bigger thing is more for post-graduation. Like there should be something written where, players are allowed to get a certain percentage of whatever revenue the university brings because of what they did. And there's not a lot of easy answers, because the reality here is that, because of what the NCAA generates in revenue with all these major programs, I mean, that supports a lot of the non-revenue teams. It supports a lot of the women's teams. And so it really comes down to how you look at this spreadsheet. How does it all even out? I don't have that spreadsheet in front of me. I think philosophically, players should be given their just due, but I don't think it should be through the same platform as it would be in the pros, because I think it would, probably create more problems than solving the ones that are already here.
Yeah, that's a great way to wrap it up, Mark. I mean, I think that you're right. It's going to be tough to compensate players in college the same way because of some of the university regulations and NCAA regulations in college. So my question is, we've talked a lot about the evolution of basketball and sports in general over the past 15 to 20 years. But how have you seen the field of sports media and reporting evolve over the past 15 to 20 years?
Well, I mean, I've only been in professional media for 12 years, and I mean, it's evolved tremendously ever since I graduated from college. I mean, with social media, with Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, I mean, that's accelerated, the speed of news, and also I think the challenging aspect of like getting accurate information. and, competing in a crowded marketplace. And I think it's really cut both ways. I think the positive parts of it is that, you're able to tell stories in different sort of channels. You can have these kind of conversations through a podcast or a webinar or a Zoom call, right? And that's not what it was before. But at the same time, you're also being constantly exposed to misinformation and just, athletes and media members and fans alike just kind of cannibalizing each other with a lot of insults that a lot of times is just unnecessary. So it has made a creative challenge, but I think for the most part, the positives have outweighed the negatives, because I think that it does expose who are good outlets, who aren't, who are the ones that work hard, who are the most enterprising and rewards that good work. I think the cream does rise to the top, but the walls have torn down where it's not a conventional, hey, you clock in at this time and you clock out at that time. Your deadline is almost never and always, because that's just the nature of the business with how news is. But the thing is, you got to adapt some way, while also, I think, clinging to, I don't want to say old school principles, but some of the traditional ideas of, hey, you know what, even if people are consuming a lot of their news on the phone or on their computer, there still is a value in, reading the hard copy of a newspaper, reading magazines, reading books, having conversations face to face, as opposed to just texting and interacting on Twitter for 140 characters, because sometimes those things get lost in translation.
Yeah, it's definitely been really entertaining to see some of Joel Embiid's Twitter escapades and some Adrian Wojnarowski bombs, Woj bombs as they call it.
Yeah.
And then, as we mentioned earlier, watching you on The Herd on YouTube, just so much access to media now. It's really, really interesting and entertaining.
Yeah.
So we had a question, or go ahead, Mark.
Oh, I was going to say, just to wrap it up, and then the thing is, I would say 5-10 years from now, I don't know how it's going to evolve, but you just know that it will, and it's going to be interesting to say the least.
Very, very interesting. As far as stories, Trevor had a question about the Kevin Durant era in Golden State and how it unfolded in the future of the Warriors.
Okay, go ahead.
So my question is, prior to signing Kevin Durant in 2016, the Warriors were a successful franchise in winning a championship and having a regular season record. But do you think when Clay and Curry come back, what are their chances to being successful, or is it a little bit too late for them to do another playoff push to win another title?
No, I don't think it's too late, but I do think that their identity is going to be different. I think, if you're going to compare eras here, the Golden State Warriors, when they won 3 championships and 5 NBA finals, they were this generation's version of the 90s Chicago Bulls, right? They won 6 titles in 8 years of 6 finals appearances. I think right now it's realistic that the Warriors can now pivot into being, what the San Antonio Spurs were in the 2000s, where they're not going to be in a finals every single year. They're not going to win back to back, but they still always have a chance to win a title. They'll always be competitive. They'll be making the playoffs. And it's a matter of, how do they bridge those 2 eras together? Obviously, it all hinges on the health and quality of play that Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green have. But I think another important quality is, how do the Warriors find those perfect blend of, drafting young players and finding role players that can fit that nucleus around them, so they can be what Tim Duncan and Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker were with the Spurs, where everyone knew, hey, that's the nucleus. Those are the main guys. But as they aged, they could evolve their game a little bit easier because they had a lot of good role players that could fill in some of the gaps that, maybe they can't.
Yeah, so Mark, I've got a follow-up question on the Warriors. So as we all know, the Warriors, with their injuries and everything like that, they haven't had the best season. They probably will have the number 1 pick this upcoming draft. I want to ask you, if you're running the Warriors, would you pick LaMelo Ball? Because on this show, I have said for months that I really think the Warriors should pick LaMelo Ball, because even though you have Stephen Curry and Klay Thompson and a lot of these guards on your team with Wiggins, I think that with Curry and Thompson getting older, I think you should draft LaMelo Ball for kind of like a replacement for them. You can put him on the bench for like the first 3 seasons, and then when Curry and Thompson, age, then you can like trade them, get some asset, and then you can bring LaMelo Ball in, and you won't really miss a beat.
Yeah, Isaiah, honestly, I don't have a firm opinion on this, only because, because of my role now as an NBA writer, I've honestly paid, before the whole pandemic happened, paid more attention to the NBA and gearing up for the playoffs as opposed to studying a lot of the draft prospects. I think offhand I would choose between LaMelo and Wiseman, but I think philosophically, especially when you have a high pick, it's always about getting the best talent as opposed to worrying, okay, what's that positional need and how does that fit? Because the reality is when you're drafting young players, they're going to go through some sort of transition and hiccup. And at the end of the day, you want to hoard as many assets as you can, because, if nothing else, maybe that can be part of a deal down the line. So, I don't have the firm answer on who's the most talented player in that draft, frankly, because my time and energy has been spent elsewhere, but it's always about talent over worries about fit, because that, if nothing else, the more assets you have, the more flexibility that you have with your roster in terms of making any changes. And I think that kind of illustrates the Warriors' thought process when Kevin Durant left for Brooklyn. They wanted to get something in return for D'Angelo Russell. And, they had some intrigue of, hey, he had a lot of potential. He had a little bit of a turning point in his career with the Brooklyn Nets as an all-star after having some up and down years, his first 2 years with the Lakers. But there were a lot of question marks of how that would fit. And obviously we saw those question marks play out, but it was of their mind, look, like if nothing else, we could flip him in a future deal, and they wound up getting Andrew Wiggins.
Yeah, and to add on to that, we've seen some crazy positional transformations after the draft before. Giannis Antetokounmpo, who was drafted as really a small forward, power forward, actually shifted into the point guard for some time in the 2016 and 2015 seasons. And Kobe Bryant, who initially started at the small forward, transitioned to the shooting guard position. So you never know what's going to happen with these players positionally. If anything, you get the best talent around you. You can train some of these players based on their athleticism, their talent, their experience playing the sport to best suit your team's needs.
Yeah, you said it perfectly. And I think, the Warriors aren't unique to this, but, a lot of NBA teams, including the Warriors, they also factor in just the guy's character. And is he, a team guy? Is he, what Draymond has famously said a few years ago of, hey, forget 82 game players. How about 16 game players? And what he meant by that is, it's one thing to have some success in the regular season, but are these guys built for the playoffs in terms of handling the pressure, being able to come up in big moments, and also, be versatile where, they can plug into different needs depending on all these, varying rotations.
Great way to put it, Mark. Let's go to Ryan from Ohio.
All right. So, Mark, you've had some pretty memorable interviews over your career. You got to interview people like Kobe, Magic Johnson, and, which this is my personal favorite, during a group interview with Meta World Peace, you helped him demonstrate how NBA players may or may not be flopping when they take charge calls. And
I can tell you, I was scared for my life when that happened. But I'm glad I'm alive.
I was about to ask, how much of a hit did he give you? Like, because it looked like he didn't exactly give you like a little love tap.
He didn't give me a love tap for sure, but I will say this: Meta World Peace, Ron Artest, I've seen him be a lot more physical in actual games than he was with me. So I think if he wanted to be physical, he could have to make a point. But I will say that I will admit, when he pulled me to the side, he wanted to demonstrate, just for people who may not have seen this video, the context of it. We're in training camp. The NBA had just instituted a rule that officials would start levying more fines to players that are flopping. And they thought that this could be an incentive to reduce flopping. And Meta was going on one of these rants that he's known for, where he was criticizing the officials. His whole point was, look, officials have called the way games the way they're supposed to. Players wouldn't flop. The only reason why players are flopping is, hey, they're trying to find a competitive advantage. So just call the game the way it should, and players will adjust. And so his point is, if a player puts his mind to it, he won't flop. And so he's looking at me. Obviously, I'm not built as an NBA player. I hardly have the same kind of muscle and pounds that they do. So he pulled me aside. He told me, hey, stand, be a man, do not flop. And he charged into me. And I will admit, when he started moving toward me, I had flashes of my image of, okay, this is Ron Artest, the guy who got a suspension for the Palace Brawl for punching a fan and going to the stands. He gave James Harden a concussion by elbowing him. Like, what is he going to do to me? And thankfully, when he charged into me, I still stood up on my own. I did not feel hurt at all. And so I started getting a little confident and told him, hey, do it again. And I knew that he wouldn't hurt me. But I will say that there was a split-second thought process in my head where I wondered, this might be it. This might be it.
Well, it's great to hear, Mark, that some of the Lakers championship pedigree rubbed off on you. And you were able to take that like a champ, you know?
I would hardly say that, but I'm glad that I'm at least alive to tell the tale.
So Mark, would you say that was your favorite or most memorable interview, or would you say it was a different one?
Well, I mean, that was one of my most enjoyable interactions with Ron. There was a time when the Warriors won the championship in 2018. Nick Young was on the team. I knew Nick from covering his 4-year run with the Lakers. And look, for any Lakers fan that they know Nick Young's up and downs from, having an initial really good season, coming back, and then having frustrations with Byron Scott. He and D'Angelo Russell having that fallout because of the whole leaked video.
Oh, yeah.
So this all kind of came full circle where, hey, here's a moment where a season after having his resurgence with the Lakers, he signs with the Warriors. He wins his first championship ring. He sees me and pours champagne on me. That was pretty funny. But I will say, the most memorable, those aren't the most memorable. This is the most memorable and unfortunately the most tragic. But, I interviewed Kobe Bryant, 9 days before he passed. And it was just a real surreal feeling because, we had set up an interview, for a story I was working on about, hey, how has he managed to pivot from, having this accomplished NBA career to doing all these different things post-retirement with overseeing a storytelling company and, doing podcasts and doing ESPN's Detail and overseeing a sports academy and coaching his daughter. And so, in true Kobe fashion, 4 years after his retirement, he's done a lot of things, but in his mind, he's just getting started. And the other part is, he seemed a lot more at peace than he was during his career. And so it was a real cool moment to just kind of see a different side of it. And then all of a sudden, 9 days later, you get the news that he died in a helicopter crash with his 13-year-old daughter, Gianna. And so, obviously for everyone in the NBA family and the general public, that was a huge tragedy that was hard to stomach. But, the fact that I had that interview so shortly before all that happened made it a lot even more difficult to process and handle.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, all condolences go out to Kobe Bryant, Gianna Bryant, and all the lives lost in that helicopter crash. It still resonates with all of us in the basketball community and definitely everyone here in the panel. And I was so touched by his work of Dear Basketball after he had retired. And, sorry you had to go through that experience of interviewing him and then seeing him pass away.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the kind words. I mean, I kind of look at it two ways. I'm glad I interviewed him. I mean, obviously I was interviewing him for a story, and that was enjoyable to catch up with him. Certainly wish he was still here, but, not that you have to choose or anything, because that's not what it's about. But I am glad that I was able to catch up with him a little bit, interview him, talk a little bit afterwards with him, as opposed to, not seeing him at all. But, regardless, it's a really tough thing to handle. And, I can't even imagine, just the pain that the Bryant family's gone through and the NBA family. Because, it's one thing, look, I covered Kobe his last 7 years at the Lakers. It was very enjoyable, but, I'm not going to pretend that I had this like close relationship or I'm friends with him. Like, that's not what this whole gig is about. It's a professional relationship. So, given that, the pain that the family and his close friends and loved ones, are feeling to this day is, beyond comprehension.
Yeah, I'm glad that you got the chance to speak with Kobe Bryant on so many occasions. He inspired me a lot personally. Him and Yao Ming had such a big impact on basketball in the Chinese community, and just hoping that relationship continues as strong as it was before. Ryan had a question about. Oh, go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
Oh yeah. Real quick, I was just saying it was cool to hear stories about Kobe's impact over there. Obviously he stood a lot to gain with his marketing and all that, but the fandom stories that you would hear and just how he inspired players like Yao Ming and Jeremy Lin. It really shows just how connected the world is here.
Yeah, speaking of how connected the world is, Ryan from Ohio had a question about basketball analytics and their role in the game today.
Yeah, so on this podcast, I brought up some advanced statistics such as value over replacement player. I still can't say that stat to this day. Win shares on offense and defense. And I just want to get your opinion. Why do you think these stats aren't brought up more in like sports media when discussing who could be a better player or who the best player is?
Well, I'll be honest, I don't even know what those stats mean. So what are those exactly?
I haven't looked up too much into them, but they basically try to estimate how many wins a player contributes based on their play. They also go per 48 minutes, so it doesn't discriminate based on like how few or how many minutes they played. And they break it down into their offense and defense. And then VORP, as it's called, I guess, is how much more value you offer over a replacement player. I assume these aren't exact sciences because there's no possible way to do that, but it's spread across, or it's evaluated evenly to all athletes. And I personally just think it would be an interesting talking point into determining who is like top 5 or who's like the best player in the league currently. So yeah, I guess I'm just curious why this isn't being more utilized.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest. I think, number one, it has to do with, what do these stats really tell? And until it really registers what it means, there's not going to be as much of an appreciation for that. But I do think that, for the most part, the NBA has become more open to analytics. A lot of basketball operations have, hired those experts and they pass along that data to the coaches. I think it's all about of how do you master both, and I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I don't think that most coaches are necessarily opposed to analytics. I think a lot of coaches actually look at it, and it is helpful. I think for specifically like player tendencies, like hey, like how productive is this guy going left, going right, like where his sweet spots. But I think the danger zone that some players and coaches do have is look, like these guys have an innate feel for the game, and a lot of it's instincts, a lot of it is just human nature, and you don't want to replace a computer algorithm into those things. You want to be able to meld them together. So the sense that I get when you talk to, even the more progressive coaches like Greg Popovich and Steve Kerr and even Mike D'Antoni, I mean, they're always going to put, the player instincts and their own instincts number one, and then they'll look at analytics as a tool. And I don't think it's archaic at all. I mean, clearly the NBA has advanced where they've seen, look, it's more conducive to shoot more threes and not as conducive to just settle for mid-range jumpers. But there is a fine line in a gray area that, you know, you don't want to do it to the expense where you're taking away a player's strength. You know, guys like Kevin Durant and DeMar DeRozan and other players, like, they really excel making those shots. And if it's open, like, take it. And so I think that, you know, there's sometimes some disagreements. You know, I think Warriors and the Rockets, you know, serve as Exhibit A, where, you know, the Warriors during their dynasty run, you know, Steve Kerr really believed in, hey, ball movement, just take the best quality shot, you know, and the most quality shot is ones that are open, ones that come off of passes, where, you know, the Rockets, you know, they looked at it with math, like threes are better than twos, you know, all the time, unless you're getting layups and getting trips to the foul line. But I would say, I don't think that, you know, the league's downplaying analytics at all. They're embracing it, but I don't think they want it to the extent that all of a sudden that they're not going to allow players to play the way they're used to playing and relying on their own instincts.
Yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see how this wave of analytics is going to impact basketball in the future. But one final question for you, Mark. I'm going to keep it simple. Greatest player of all time, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Michael Jordan, or LeBron James? And I'm not going to make you run a computer algorithm to answer this one.
Good, because I wouldn't know which ones to put. And it's not even a matter
Right.
of how many championships, whatever. I would put Michael Jordan at the top there. It's really hard to say underneath that. You can make a case for a lot of guys, but if you're asking me to choose among those three, I would choose Michael first, LeBron second, and Kareem. And I can walk you through it here. And it's not just, hey, championships or whatever.
Right, for sure.
There's no doubt Michael's the best scorer out of those guys. I mean, I know obviously Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is the all-time leading scorer, but when it comes to the way Michael scored, the fact that he was playing through so many double teams, and his maniacal competitiveness, I don't think there's a debate. He's the best at that. But I think that shouldn't take away that LeBron, early in his career, figured it out a lot earlier than Michael did, of how to be a team guy, how to elevate your teammates, how to empower them, how to make them feel comfortable. So it's almost like those two guys were running parallel tracks where, you know, a young Michael Jordan needed to learn how to trust his teammates and make them better. Right. A young LeBron James already knew that, but he needed to learn how to have the killer instinct and not be afraid to be selfish and score and take over like Michael would do. Kareem, you know, no one could stop his sky hook. And, you know, I think he's the best center along with Bill Russell. But the reality is, and this isn't a knock on Kareem, but, you know, he had some struggles after his championship with Milwaukee of, hey, how do you carry a team, until Magic Johnson came. And, you know, Magic's obviously, I think, the best point guard of all time. And also he was a great leader. He was able to make Kareem's life easier because he's a guy that fed him inside, but he also helped lead the team with his, you know, very warm personality, where Kareem was able to then just lead by example and be his introverted self. So I would handicap, you know, Michael first, LeBron second, Kareem third. But, you know, when you're opening the field there, you got to put Magic in there. You have to put Kobe in there. You have to put Bill Russell in there.
Right.
And Hakeem. And it's hard to know which order you put them all in, because they're really good players.
Well, Mark, I think you'd be hard-pressed to pick against Michael Jordan. Even some of the advanced statistics that Ryan brought up favor him. And as far as LeBron, I think one really interesting thing about him is he's always marketed as this amazing team leader and distributor. But you could really make the case that LeBron James is the greatest scorer of his era. I mean, the numbers he puts up in the playoffs, like you said, like Draymond and you said, when it comes down to the final 16 to 28 games, how do you play? LeBron James consistently drops, 28 to 31 points a game, which is just astonishing. He is an all-time talent for sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's astonishing that, he has climbed up so high in the all-time scoring list. For sure, hey, he gained a few extra years because he jumped out of high school, but He obviously had to be a talented scorer to be that high. And the fact that his mindset, even to this day, is not to score first. It is to, set up a teammate. And usually the guys high on that scoring list, their first instinct was score the basketball.
Absolutely.
So the fact that he's been able to do that, obviously he's healthy, very talented, but it also shows that he has a lot of tools in his toolbox. And at this stage in his career, he has mostly mastered knowing when to use which tool in that toolbox.
Yeah, well said. And I hope the 1 year out of high school rule can get lifted so we can have that next LeBron James. Next guy can have the extra time to pass LeBron once he gets that all-time scoring mark.
There you go. We'll see.
Well, thank you so much. It was amazing having you on, Mark. I just want to wish you the best of luck for all your future goals. And Isaiah, thank you for bringing Mark on. This has been an amazing and eye-opening experience for all of us here at Quarantine Chats.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. And I'm really humbled and honored that I was able to talk some hoops with you. And we're in tough times here, so just continue to wish you and yours good health and good fortune moving forward.
Yeah,
Mark. Well, have a great week, Mark, and stay safe out there.
Yeah, Mark, like Steven said, thanks for coming on. It was a great pleasure. And feel free to, if you want to jump on, just Instagram DM me and we'll set it up.
Sounds like a plan. Be well, guys.
All right. Thanks, man.
Bye, Mark.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Thank you so much, Mark.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, guys, so that's going to do it for us for now, but we're going to take a quick commercial break, and we'll come back with some of our analysis on the ESPN Top 74 NBA Players list. Brian and Isaiah got a lot to say about it. I got a lot to say about it as well. Steph Curry, Kawhi Leonard, Kevin Durant, Damian Lillard, all these players are going to be mentioned, so be sure to tune in, guys. I'm going to put us on a quick commercial break. Isaiah.
And also, one last thing I got to say is that also when we come back, we're going to be ranking our top 5 shooting guards. And also we will be talking about JT Daniels landing with my Georgia Bulldogs. So
the better JT, Ryan.
JT
my
Barrett.
opinions on this.
I'm playing with you guys. I got to add a little bit of controversy, but that'll do it for us, guys. For now, we're going to get into the commercial break, and I'll see you guys shortly. Thanks.